Good morning, Hubert Johnson here with smartmoneyculture.tv. Thank you everybody for watching live or on rebroadcast, and it is Friday. So today we're going to kind of wrap up the business taxes portion of it. There's a lot more to dive into, but again, everything I've been talking about is kind of a broad stroke. There's a lot more to go into pretty much on every single case. And that's what we're trying to do, is answer questions and help people, guide people through the process. Today we're going to be focusing on business taxes and the states. There are particular kinds of taxes that the states deal with and address, and we want to make sure we get that taken care of. Again, and we'll be back in just a little bit to talk about that. And we got some interesting news from the IRS as well. So again, stay with us and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back, everybody. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. And before we dive into today's material, just kind of want to take a step back. And there's an interesting program that just came out. So again, I want to share a little bit of news, what's going on with the IRS. And so again, just going to the news releases, something very interesting popped up where every year the IRS asks for volunteers, normal people in the community, to volunteer about 5 hours a week and serve on a tax advocacy panel. Now, I'm tempted to do it myself, but I don't have 5 extra hours a week. But what this does is you get to get on this panel and tell the IRS, again, it's a 3-year term, so this is not a small commitment. This is a big commitment. And you make suggestions to the IRS about how they can improve their services, improve how they serve the public. So again, if you're interested, if you know anybody that might be interested, and it's a volunteer position. It's with the Tax Advocacy Panel, TAP, and then they want applications by March 15th of 2024. So again, it's you do have opportunities to offer input. Whether or not they'll listen to them, that's a different story. But again, getting involved in the process, is so important. Seeing how they actually treat people and how you can help the IRS actually be responsive. That is so important right now. They're not responsive. A lot of that has to do with this administration. I don't like to get political. I try not to. I have not seen this level of lack of service from the IRS and the lack of understanding from them. It wasn't like this under Obama. It wasn't like this under previous Democrat presidents or Republican. So it's unique to this administration. Anyway, I could go on and on about that. So again, tax advocacy panel, something to consider. They do take people from all across the country and they try to balance things out. So if you're interested and you have time to give back and try to help the IRS become better, please consider it. So moving on to today's topic, and this is state taxes. It's about as fun as it sounds. So state taxes with businesses. So there's quite a few different taxes. We're going to talk about the main ones and how to navigate through different states, some of the more popular states. So we talked about mainly payroll and business income taxes. Now, do you have to file business income taxes with the states as well? Almost always. The states that don't have income taxes, that, Texas, Nevada, Florida, you don't have to worry about doing that. You just have to comply with, there are other issues. So, some of those states are usually high property tax states, which kind of balances out in the end. It depends on which state you're in and how expensive they are. Each state varies. So we talked about payroll, we talked about income tax. There's also, or business income tax. There are also other penalties and fees. One of the big things that has popped up is healthcare penalties. So this is something that has really hit larger businesses very hard in the last few years, is going after businesses for not offering sufficient healthcare. If you are a larger business, be very aware of what's happening. And again, I'm not going to dwell on this too long because it doesn't affect a lot of businesses, but for larger businesses with 20 or more people, it doesn't matter if you offer health care or if you ask people if they want to enroll, and if they decline, that's another issue. But you need to have something in place and say, here's how you sign up. You have to offer something. So talk to some healthcare experts. That's a niche within tax law. And I've seen businesses burned with multi-million-dollar fees because the administration is they thought they were complying with the law, and the administration held that they hadn't done enough to offer health care. So again, this is a very big problem out there facing larger businesses. Be very aware of that. There are plenty of other fees, failure to maintain or handle 401k properly. There's any kind of responsibility you have can trigger some pretty nasty fees from the federal and penalties from the federal government. Failure to file W-2s correctly. So again, you have a lot of responsibility as a business owner. Make sure on top of it, make sure you have good tax professionals handling your work. A lot of cases I see aren't because the business owner was lazy or had issues. A lot of times it's because they had a team around them, or they had one or two people helping them, but they didn't verify that things were being done, and they ended up getting burned and burned bad. And then we had to step in and help out. So make sure your team is communicating with you. If you're not getting answers, it might be because you're not communicating well enough with them. And a lot of times you just don't know the questions to ask. So check in with them, talk to them, make sure everything's fine, make sure you're seeing the returns, make sure that what they need to be doing is happening, actually happening. And it doesn't hurt every now and then just to call the IRS, review your account, or have someone reach out to them and say, hey, is everything fine? If you're not sure, if you have questions, better to get ahead of it. Now we're going to transition to the states. What are some of the taxes that you have to deal with the states? So one of the biggest, sales tax. Sales tax is not collected by the federal government. It is solely, just a state issue. And again, it varies by state how much sales tax, if they charge. Almost all of them charge sales taxes. So that's you as a business owner. When you sell goods or product, you are required to collect sales taxes and remit those to the state. If you get behind on those, again, this is another nasty one where they treat it as if you're stealing from this time not from your employees, but from the federal government, because you actually collected that money. It's money you received and you held on to it. And I understand businesses get in trouble, but you want to stay on top of this. This is a lot of the times, many states, they require monthly filings, if not more often. So again, you've got to stay on top of these filings. You've got to stay on top of payments. If you do fall behind, we need to negotiate this out. We need to get you squared away. And we help businesses all the time get squared away with sales taxes. Now, there's also unemployment insurance taxes that you have to pay. And it's often, it can be run by the same Department of Revenue or Department of Taxation that handles the sales taxes. It's not always the case. So you can have unemployment insurance, you can have sales tax with a different department, you can have workers' comp that people might get behind on. And in California, they recently created another department. So in California, they have the California Franchise Tax Board, which is the main collection agency. They collect the income taxes. Um, you have the CDTFA, which is a newer organization created by California because they love layers of bureaucracy. They do the sales taxes. Then you have the Board of Equalization, and you have the EDD. So you've got 4 organizations in California to deal with. So it's a nightmare out there. Um, Sorry, no offense to California, but there's a reason businesses aren't staying. A lot of reasons, and that's one of them. It's just hard to do business in a state with so many layers of bureaucracy. So, as a business owner, if you're starting your business, you start to have employees. You have to be registered with the Secretary of State. Get your business license, which is pretty easy to get. And then you have to consider all these state agencies that you might have to comply with. If you're selling any product or good, you need to be paying sales tax. You need to be very mindful of that. So this is why there are business coaches that can help you through this. You can talk to good tax preparer, CPA. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet, getting an EIN is easier than you would think. Now, getting your business set up as an LLC or LLP, however you want to have it formed, talking to, again, a good CPA, they can do most of that for you. If your business is more complicated, if you have a partnership and you need an agreement drafted, a corporate attorney can help you, a business attorney or corporate attorney. And if there are plenty of that do it and don't charge outrageous fees, it can be just $1,000 or so to make sure it's done right. And they can help you get the EIN, get everything set up correctly, and they should be guiding you through that process. So you have to look into whatever state you're in, investigate what liabilities am I stepping into? What responsibilities am I going to have when I take this leap to have employees? And again, know what you're facing and be informed before you do that, because that's one of the big problems that people face is they start having employees, they start growing, they hire people, and then all of a sudden they find out they're not in compliance with a bunch of different state rules or IRS rules for that matter. And it happens more often than you would think. So again, a lot of pitfalls for businesses. Make sure you're talking with local experts. And if you need that, we can always give you a referral. A local referral. We refer people all across the country and even Hawaii, Guam, and Puerto Rico. So if you aren't sure how to do it and what your responsibilities are, first of all, find out, ask, get the right help that you need to make sure that you're not going to end up in a hole where you're going to need someone like us. Again, Hubert Johnson at thesmartmoneyculture.tv. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for listening here at Taxes Made Easy. I'm Hubert Johnson with Guardian Tax Law here at smartmoneyculture.tv. So welcome to everybody watching live or on rebroadcast. And what we're talking about today are business taxes and with the state. Now, what I mentioned and went over are the kind of taxes aren't everything that states have to or businesses have to be worried about with the states. Again, the number of taxes are multiple. There's so many out there. It's kind of hard to think about. So one of the big ones, you have to worry about licensing with the state. But one of the big ones that I haven't mentioned are 2290s for truckers. 2290s, most people haven't even heard of that. There's 943 farm taxes or forms that farmers have to file for farms and other agricultural goods. And that's more rare. But I want to talk about the 2290s, which is called a heavy highway use tax. If you are an independent trucker or you run your own trucking business, you're probably aware of this form and tax. It's a heavy highway use tax that's dependent on the number of miles a semi truck or larger is driven on the roads, on the freeways. So it's based on the mileage of the vehicle, and it's supposed to go to fix our highways. So for the heavy highway use tax, someone needs to be filing this. So if you're an independent or if you're a trucker and you work for a company, if they pay you a W-2 wage, 9 times or 99 times out of 100, they are filing, your company is filing the 2290 for you. Sometimes, depending on the arrangement, if you're a 1099 employee, you come and go, you work for a company, but you might work for others also. There are times that they file the 2290 for you, this heavy highway use tax form, and it's a yearly form. And it's something we deal with a lot because we run into a lot of truckers that don't have great records. They need help, and it's just like realtors. It's one of those careers that runs into a lot of tax problems. So with how do you know if your employer is filing a 2290 or not? So a lot of times they'll work for one company and they'll be making these reports. Then they'll move to another company as a 1099, or they'll work for 2 different companies. One will file the 2290 and the other won't. If you're a 1099 employee or trucker, semi-independent, you need a check. It's a simple call to your HR, your manager, your boss, and just verify that the 2290 returns are being filed for you. And many larger companies do. If you are independent, which means you either are leasing a truck or you own your own truck and you're driving, making money, but you're working for yourself. I mean, you're always working for some kind of company, you're getting income or whatever, but you are largely your own show. You absolutely need to be filing these tax returns. Anybody with time in the business usually knows about this 2290 form and the taxes that go with it. So get good information. If you're starting out as a trucker, you're considering getting your own truck, or either lease or purchase or buying a truck outright. Check with the CPA. If they don't know, or if your taxpayer doesn't know what a 2290 is, go find somebody else. Again, we can always refer you to CPAs that know about 2290s, and you don't have to have a CPA, but you need someone doing your bookkeeping, and you need someone keeping track of these taxes. And the hard thing for truckers, a lot of times they have low expenses because they're on the road. Some of them just live out of their truck or out of hotels. The IRS will not give them credit for eating out as much as truckers do because they're on the road. They eat out. That's what they do. What else are they supposed to do? They can't stop and cook a meal in the kitchen because they're on the road. So their food bills are usually very high, but their housing utilities is very low because if they do maintain a residence, a lot of times they might have a place with the parents that they'll crash at. But if they're on the road most of the time, they're on the road. So we see a lot of truckers where normally we could help somebody out, but it can be a very difficult situation if they don't have a residence or home. And again, a lot of the expenses, motels, etc., the IRS does not care about, which is, I think, a travesty because it's just in the nature of the beast. That's how truckers operate. So if you fall into that niche or little area where you are independent or 1099, find out, make sure who's filing the 2290s, because that is one of the big things that hits truckers in particular. So let's go back and focus. We're going to refocus on state taxes. So you have every state is different. And so it's kind of a chore to figure out one state from the next. But if you have a good overview of how they operate, you can go into the state and figure it out very quickly. You call the Department of Transportation, talk to their business unit. When I say DOT or DOR, Department of Revenue, I'm just using that as a general term. Each state has a different name for their taxation departments. DOR is the most common, so Department of Revenue. So call their business line, talk to a local CPA that's familiar with their tax rules and obligations. And if you're behind, get current. So the same thing as in the personal side. You have to file your taxes, not owe moving forward. So make sure you're not adding more debt. And then it's very important that then you set up some kind of resolution to handle your back taxes, the same as in any other case. And here's the kicker. I say this all the time. And almost everybody I talk to, they say, oh, I've heard that too. The states are harder to deal with than the IRS. Business taxes are no exception. Some states are tougher than others, but hands down, it's easier to deal with the IRS than the states. So I was talking to someone yesterday. He had state and tax issues. It is important to make sure you don't owe moving forward, and that's the number one concern for them. So you file your taxes moving forward, you get current on your tax filings, and that you're not going to owe moving forward. And if I beat that like a bongo drum, it's because it's so important. The way you don't owe is you make estimated tax payments. You pay throughout the year, so you're not going to owe at the end of the year. And here's the fun part. You get 100% credit for taxes being paid in. So last night, I was talking to someone from Hawaii. They had roughly about $200,000 in debt from the state and the IRS. When I went through their financial information, they had positive income about $1,400 a month. So if I called and presented their information to the IRS right then and there in the state, they would say, pay us. Pay us both. The problem with that being is if they owe for the current year, that's going to default whatever installment agreement, payment plan, whatever is set up for them, it'll default it. So we have to get them on a track moving forward. So I looked at the taxes from the previous year and I said, okay, based on your last tax return, this is how much you owe in taxes. This is what you need to pay in estimated taxes so you don't owe moving forward. And it was around $1,800. But that does two things. And the thing is, he was paying estimated tax payments to the federal government, but I said, hey, we don't want to owe the state either. The state's worse than the IRS. You get full credit for estimated tax payments to the state, as well as the IRS. So if he just paid the IRS, he'd still be positive $100 to $200. But after he pays the state too, to make sure you won't owe the state, then all of a sudden, the heavens open, he qualifies, we can do an offer and compromise for him. And you can do offer and compromises for businesses. IRS prefers that they're closed, but the options open up, especially if you're self-employed, if you're a small business, you don't have payroll liabilities, the options open up. And then, again, by paying those estimated tax payments, you get a better deal, as well as making sure that you're not going to owe moving forward. Now, on the same hand, if you do have state tax, you can set up a payment plan, and you will get credit, not always for the full amount, but you'll get credit for that, and it will help you pay less to the IRS as well. So that's why state debt, especially business debt, sticks around for at least 20 years. Larger debts can get extended out past the 20 years. And trust me, New York and California are known to do that on larger debts. There are debts that do expire and become unenforceable with the states as well. But again, it's that 20-year mark. I was talking to someone, a case just the other day, they had debt going back to 1999. So it's not uncommon to have debt from 2004, 5, 6 still hanging around from state debt. Some of that is now starting to drop off, but again, it's yesterday I was looking at a case where there was debt from 1999 and 2006. 2006 is going to be around till 2027, 2028, roughly. So the plan is for them to pay that off. And then the 1999 debt should be rolling off in the next couple of years. In that case, hopefully this year, it'll become unenforceable. So be strategic about how you deal with business taxes with the state if they're getting older. But I mean, usually as long as the business is open, as long as you're making a profit, you want to deal with these taxes, you want to address it. Most businesses don't even last 20 years. I think I heard it's around 2% of businesses that make it 20 years. So what happens when the business closes down? If the business stays open, wonderful, great, pay your taxes, get on your state taxes. But with the IRS, when a business shuts down, what happens to all the taxes? We talked about the payroll taxes, where what was withheld from the employees' checks can be assigned personally to the responsible parties. But what about all the other business taxes? When a company closes and shuts down, you need to go in and let the IRS know that, hey, file a final return, have the IRS close out the filing requirements. Sometimes you can just do this over the phone. Say, look, it closed on this date. You know, the ideal way to do it is to file a final return. Can be a zero return, just mark it final. Easy peasy. You just have to know which return to file. And we can close that filing requirement out. There's no more filing requirements, and all of that debt sticks with that EIN that's now closed out with the IRS. So we have hundreds of thousands of dollars that people are trying to pay on business debt to the IRS. We close it out as a defunct corporation, and they don't have to pay a penny of it. True story. I have a client who had 3 businesses with the same business partner. Again, business partner. See a lot of problems coming out of that. And the business partner kind of took over, shut her up, or her name was still on the business. And the business partner ran these businesses into the ground. Fast forward 6 years. Our client decided to go improve her life, got burned by this business, and she went to law school. Now, if you don't know what it's like to come out of law school, it can be very difficult. Just graduating with a law degree doesn't mean you become an attorney. You still not only have to pass the bar, but you have to pass an ethics review as well. And they look at tax debt, they look at personal debt, credit card debt. So what everybody says in law school is like, look, it's best to become an attorney when you're young because you haven't lived life. You don't have any dings on your history. You haven't had any bankruptcies. You haven't had any financial problems that can happen to people. So they have held up her bar license for almost 2 years because of this issue. We closed out the businesses. I even testified to the bar on her behalf, to a bar panel, and said, look, you guys are requiring that she do what nobody else. These are closed out as defunct corporations. She has no more legal liability. And we do this all the time, and the IRS leaves it alone. But the bar is still going after them. So what did we do? We filed an offer in compromise for the businesses, $20 offers. They're closed, it's defunct, and the IRS accepted it within a month. Lightning fast. Because they'd rather take $20 and wipe it all out because they know the person has no legal liability to pay. It's very different with the states. flip it on its head. So especially for sales tax, they will go after the individual responsible for that EIN. So one quick note about the IRS. If you have an EIN, if you have tax debt, a business that's going under, that happens. People, that's the economy. Businesses are created, they flourish for a while. Most of them fail. But then you get in there and you preserve this, you make sure you do what you can to make the business last. But if it does close down, you can close out the EIN, close out that business, and then go open another business. Here's the caveat. Do not close down Sally Mae's Cleaning and then reopen Sally Joe's Cleaning and do the exact same thing under a new EIN. If people are opening one EIN after another and then just closing it out and reopening another one to avoid taxes, the IRS can absolutely make those taxes follow that EIN or follow that individual. That's considered fraud. And again, but if you close down Sally Mae's Cleaning and then you open up Sally Joe's car detailing business, no problem. It's a different business. What they don't want is for you to go and do the exact same thing, close out one business, not pay the taxes, and then just reopen it under a different EIN. Same thing with the states. So be aware of that. If someone says, hey, just close out this EIN and then reopen another one. If you're going to reopen another one, you can do that, but it has to be a different kind of business. So be very aware of closing out one EIN and going to another. So that helps with the IRS, not so much with the states, especially for sales tax, unemployment insurance, a lot of the things. They will follow you personally and go after the responsible party. The states don't care. They want their money. And so there are plenty of times where the states will pursue the individual as if it was personal debt. Now, once the business closes down, you can use all the different options that were available to you beforehand. And we're running out of time, and I don't want to go over, but we're going to really dive into some of the bigger states and what are your options and how can you deal with personal tax debt or a business tax debt for closed businesses. So we'll be back in about 30 seconds. I hope this has been informative for you. And we'll be wrapping this up in the next session and ready to take a nice weekend. I hope everybody's ready for a weekend. And again, any questions you have, go to the Smart Money Culture or the smc.tv or smartmoneyculture.tv, and you can click on a link in the top right corner to reach out to us. Again, Hubert Johnson with Guardian Tax Law. We'll be right back in just a couple minutes. Welcome back, Guardian Tax Law. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. Just want to touch in real quick. If you have questions, reach out to us through go to smartmoneyculture.tv or the smc.tv. In the top right corner, there's an opportunity link. And click on that to learn more about the show and reach out to us directly, or you can always find us directly on our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. So want to get into the nitty gritty a little bit on some different states. How do they treat businesses? So anytime you have a business, if you just have business debt, it's under the EIN, and that's what we need to focus on. And so one of the big things I get is sometimes people don't know what their EIN is. I have a case right now where their mother passed away. And they're trying to wrap up the estate. They want to sell a property, but there's some liens involved. And so they have to figure out what's going on so they can sell the property, address the tax liens, and wrap up their mother's estate. Problem is the tax liens are under the EIN. They don't have the EIN, so they have to dig it up. If paperwork is filed correctly, you can dig up that information through going to the Corporation Commission. the state secretary of state, the secretary of state for your local state, or there is a business line that you can call and get information from. So you can call and get that information. I'm going to go ahead and give you that number. I think I touched on it before. So many different numbers here. 1-800-829-4933. And so, or you can go to howtostartanllc.com. What is an EIN? How to look up EIN, and they can also help you get that information. So if you don't have it, or if you are working on a relative's case that either they're not capable anymore or they've lost that information for an older business, you can dig up that information. So please give, if you need that information, you can call that number or we can help. So you have to get the EIN, you have to have the address, you have to have other issues as well to get this taken care of. So you have to have the basic information for the business to do a power of attorney, to dig into it, because if you don't have a valid power of attorney based on the business, you can't get that. So the easiest way to do this is go ahead and get any letter from the state. A lot of times if you don't have all the information, any kind of letter, it'll have an account number on it. Especially with the states. California, they're so hard to deal with, and their power of attorneys are so ridiculous now that we prefer to just get a letter. So whatever letters you get from state, especially collection letters, save them, that they not only have valuable information, but a lot of times you can use those letters to get through very easily, even if you don't have the EIN. And you can get basic information, you can find out what's going on with the case, and work off of those letters from the state. Not so with the IRS, you have to file a power of attorney. But again, because the states treat these as personal debts under the EIN in most cases, you not only have to deal with the personal case, but with the business case. So if the business stays open, the business in 99% of the cases needs to handle the debt. Now, there's a few exceptions. You can do an abatement, you can try to get some of it removed, or a penalty. There's times that penalties you can get removed. If the original tax returns were not filed correctly, you can always go to refile a tax return. There are exceptions to this with the states, but the general rule is that you can always go and file an original return to replace a filing enforcement or return that the state filed for you. And you can always amend a return. They might not like it. They might take forever to process it, but I have cases that it's taken a year or so for the IRS or the state to process an amended return. So if your information is not great, or if it's not correct, you could always get in there and have it amended and corrected. So again, to discuss those issues, this gets a little bit more into the weeds. It can get very complicated. Give us a call. Reach out to us at guardiantaxlaw.com. Now, true stories. What you can do if a business closes depends on the state. So in New York, for example, we get a lot of cases from New York. You have, they have a good offer and compromise program. We've settled hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales tax cases, as well as business taxes, on closed businesses. The business is no longer operating, it's been closed out. Not recently, but if a business is 6, 7 years or more, they will frequently consider an offer. They are much more likely to do an offer the older the tax debt is. So if it goes to 10 years or more, it's a good candidate. Anything in the last couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, 4 or 5 years is kind of on that a little iffy. New York will just say, look, it's too recent. You might qualify, everything looks good, but we've got 20 years to collect on this. Why would we do an offer now? And I might just let that sit there and they'll try to do what they can. They'll see if you can pay. Um, and the problem with New York is if you can set up an installment agreement based on your ability to pay, but if you can't pay anything, you're just subject to collections. True story, I have a client I've been working with for quite some time, and we've got his case almost ready to wrap up. But he's homeless in New York. And so for a while he was on the streets with his teenage son. His son has now moved on to better things, but his dad is still stuck in New York City trying to eke out a living. Trust me, it's not easy. Anybody that's lived in New York City knows how tough it is, especially on the people struggling to get by. I've heard it said that if you are struggling in New York, it's best to get out before you're flat broke, because once you get flat broke, once you hit bottom, you can't afford to leave. Can't afford to restart somewhere else that's more affordable. So he had a business partner, familiar thing. Well, actually, he wasn't even a partner. He was an employee. And his owner told him, hey, sign these documents. He didn't know what it was. And he said, just sign these. His owner was a bit shisty, or his employer was pulling a fast one, had him sign on for a bunch of tax forms with the state. He got stuck with the liability because he was held as the responsible party, and the owner didn't put his name on anything for those years. He knew it was going to be a problem, and he passed the buck to his employee, and then years later, the employee's still dealing with it. So I talked to the employer's attorney. I said, look, we're doing an offer. He doesn't have any money, no way to make an offer. And I told him, look, this exactly wasn't above board, and he doesn't have the money to offer New York anything, and they want something, like 10% or whatever. And it's over $100,000. So the owner, we had a nice talk, and he's paying the $10,000 to settle this for his employee. In a perfect world, the owner would be held fully responsible. My client wouldn't have had to go through all of this. But it's not a perfect world. We do the best that we can. So we were able to wipe out this business debt, not only with the IRS, but also with the state of New York. We have had multiple cases where people had old sales taxes with New York and were able to settle it. Most states do not do an offer and compromise on sales taxes. You go to California, Nevada, that option does not exist, especially if you have an open business. Again, you've got to wait till those expire, 20 years, or get on some kind of payment plan to pay what you can. And usually when you're on some kind of payment plan or hardship status, they'll leave you alone, but you need to engage. So, true story, a lot of Midwest states are using collection agencies. Illinois is very well known for this. So they will use collection agencies to collect. They're very aggressive. And if you have any kind of business debt, again, like I said, they will treat it as hold the owner personally responsible and go after their personal assets. So this is why I say time and time again, if you have a choice of paying the state or the IRS, pay the state. Make sure you're current with the state. Again, 20 years versus 10 makes a huge difference in a case, and you have much better options in general when dealing with the IRS. There have been, ironically, sometimes it's easier to get an offer through New York than the IRS, but that's just due to changes in the last few years with the current administration, and we're hoping that gets reversed because this is a historical anomaly. We're really hoping the tax expert community is really hoping that a lot of these rules change and make it easier once again for taxpayers, as it has been historically. The trend has been to make it easier for taxpayers over the last 15, 20 years, and even longer than that. So California, you have to deal with all different kinds of organizations, and they don't talk well between each other. They do not communicate. So you can have 3 different installment agreements with the state of California, with different agencies. And California can also, the Franchise Tax Board can collect on other debt that you didn't even know about. So civil enforcements, et cetera, anything that's related to the state, and they actually have a separate unit within the Franchise Tax Board that collects non-tax debt. Now I have mentioned the BFS before, but the IRS, the federal government has the same thing called the BFS, and it's rare that you'll run into them, but there's times that people don't know where their debt is, and we have to go and research and dig it up. And that's where, again, you have to contact your local state, see what your options are. The same options that are usually available on your individual debt will be the same to you available under the business. Closing out an EIN is usually not the fix. And with the Franchise Tax Board, again, California being one of the main states that we work with, you have to either pay the balances and file all your tax returns with the state, and there's an $800 fee every time you file a tax return for every year. Or they have recently come out with a program to waive that. California is one of the worst as far as that, where it becomes, they just pile on a new fee every single year with interest and penalties. But they have come out with a new program. You have to qualify for it and show that you've done what you can and try to close out the business. So that has been an improvement that California has taken, and it has helped. It does help people quite often that are behind. They've had a closed business and they just didn't close it out correctly because they didn't know better. So one thing, the biggest takeaways from today: pay your state taxes. Stay on top of it. If you do run to an issue where you have to deal with state taxes, contact a tax professional. It is, if it's not a lot of money, and that's the only nice thing about the state taxes, is that it's usually a lot less money than the federal government. But if it's more than you can handle easily, call, get some free advice, find out what your best options are, and move forward from there. Number 2, make sure you have the right licensing, that you're filing the right returns for your industry and for your state. Again, it varies by state. They all have different kinds of taxes and issues that you have to deal with. So make sure you're talking to you have a good financial team around you. Number 3, have good record keeping. So for heavy highway use tax, you have to keep track of that mileage. Every single business needs good bookkeeping. Not only file quarterly payments, but to understand where your business is going and be ready to file your taxes at the end of the year. Most companies, they get in the habit of filing an extension every single year. And a lot of times, again, there's too much going on. It's going to take time. So it makes sense. They need more time to file that extension. But the better your books are, and the more on top of your books are, and there's no reason why you can't unless it's a very complicated business and you're waiting for information from other sources. Stay on top of it. It will make life so much easier. And again, you get some states like New York is one of the few that will suspend driver's licenses. They will suspend business licenses. And so be very aware of the damage that can be done by states, because it can hurt. And the collections can be very bad. When Illinois, Kansas is another one, Nebraska, when they refer your cases out to private collections, they are very aggressive. And they're not going to take a hardship status. They want the money, they want it full, and once they garnish you, they will do everything they can not to release that garnishment. They might reduce it to something you can afford to pay, but again, they're not as giving as the actual departments of revenue. And you have state attorney generals. And here in Arizona, we deal with the attorney general quite a bit. Same thing, they're much harder to work with. So I'm out of time. We'll see you next week.